the range for serum estradiol on TRT to have great erections and killer libido, as well as full-blown climax sensation and actual penile sensation, is the perfect estradiol number. Yeah, the perfect number for E2 in your blood on TRT resides in this video. I think this is one of the most important topics, and I should preface it with saying you should have between 55 and 90 nanograms per deciliter of DHT, okay? That is a staple if you want good erections on TRT. But because of all the information out there on estradiol and where estrogen should be, most of it, by the way, being totally conflicting with one another, people have this confused and aim for different numbers and end up at different numbers and end up not dialed in. What I'm going to break down in this video is every single stage of estradiol. Where are erections, libido, sensation at 15 picograms per milliliter of estradiol? Where is it at 20? Where is it at 25? Where is it at 27? Where is it at 30? Where is it in the 35 to 45 range? Where is it in the 45 to 60 range? And in all those ranges, so you can identify the characteristics of each, where should you aim to be? Besides the DHT being 55 to 90, this is the most important thing anyone on TRT can know. And by the end of this video, you'll know. So let's break it down. The best estradiol number on TRT for killer libido and rock hard erection quality. Let's do it. All right, before we start the video, Cortex Labs, which is my company, is a TRT guidance and sexual dysfunction resolution company. Got a range of products around that topic. Number one, mastering testosterone cream. Look, if you want to get on cream, if you're on cream and having sexual dysfunction, I wrote the video course to teach you how to achieve stellar libido and erections. It's 20% off. You can download it and watch it instantly and execute the protocols. Source list. Look, a list of vetted hormone, anabolic, androgenic compounds and ancillaries. It's 20% off right now. You can get it down in the description of this video. Coaching. I am a coach on TRT, and 99% of the inquiries that I get are people that are having libido and erection issues on testosterone. We will resolve those issues. You can book me for any of the packages that I have for coaching in underaminutelifecortex.com. The 3 and 6 month packages right now for a limited time are 30% off. Codes on the screen and down below. Let's check out this thread to start. What's the test dose where estrogen finally kicked your ass? I've worked my way up to 350 milligrams weekly, so that's 50 milligrams daily. Guys essentially on the lowest level of a cycle you can be on. Haven't noticed any estrogen side effects yet. This is probably the max I'll go because I don't want to use an AI. So he just jumped on this cycle. Very soon as the estrogen builds up in the tissue, the ED is going to start. But this comment pretty much says it all, and I'll break all this down. I run into E2 problems at 150 milligrams even, puts me roughly at 1300 TT, 300-ish free T, soft D, low energy, bloated. I think most of this sub is crazy letting their estrogen go so high. Well, I totally agree. He goes, I feel best with mine 30 to 40, independent of test level. One thing I want to make clear, as I've made clear in the past, since folks need to take this away, is the ratio stuff that people are spewing. Well, as long as if your test is 1500, estradiol is going to come up proportionally, as long as it's in a particular ratio, which, by the way, is nowhere in any scientific literature, anywhere. Then, miraculously, you're going to be good. That's not true. Just because your body is pumping out estradiol like a sieve because you've got 1,700 tests does not make it good. Yes, is it the natural flow of things? Well, yeah, there's more aromatizable substance. So the aromatase enzymes are going to do their job either way. If you have 1,800 tests or 2,000 tests and 75 to 120 picograms per milliliter of estradiol, you're still going to have sexual dysfunction. All right, so let's talk about all these different echelons so that we can determine the exact best place to shoot for serum estradiol on TRT for great libido and great erections and great sensation and great climate. To understand that, though, we should talk about all the stuff that isn't the best place in serum estradiol to be. All right, number one, let's start in the 10 to 15 picograms per milliliter range of E2. In 10 to 15 picograms per milliliter, you're going to have a rare subset of individuals for whatever reason, call it brain masculinization from DHT early in life via genetic, that erections, libido, sensation, climax is actually really good at 10 to 15 picograms per milliliter of estradiol. Again, this is a rare few. This is not the number to shoot for. And what typically happens in that band of E2, 10 to 15, is erection quality starts failing due to next to no or very limited libido. Look, we need aromatization of androgens into estradiol in the brain for libido to a certain extent, and if it drops below a threshold, which is usually below 20 or so, the libido starts going down. Your visceral connection to the dopamine side of interest and reward around sex goes down, and therefore it's going to be hard to maintain an erection. At the 10 to 15 picograms per milliliter range, it is usually hard or impossible to retain water correctly. Right? You start pumping out less antidiuretic hormone, and generally the water retentive mechanisms are not firing at full capacity. So you'll notice when people crush their estrogen, they go 10 to 15 or below that, they can't retain water, right? They're just peeing like a sieve. They can't, they drink, they pee. They drink water, they pee. They try not to drink water, they pee. And then you start diluting your serum electrolytes and things get wacky. You start feeling lightheaded and it's just not good. In the 10 to 15 picograms per milliliter range, you also have less serotonin support, okay? You do need some optimization, I should say, of the receptor sites, the serotonin receptor sites, which estradiol can achieve. It is actually the case that estradiol itself sensitizes serotonin receptors to the signal of serotonin. So when it drops too low, you start feeling, this is why people get depressed and have mood disorders on lower end estradiol. Right, so that's the 10 to 15 picograms per milliliter range. Let's move up a band to the 20s, low 20s. Call it 20 to 22 picograms per milliliter of estradiol. Again, there's a rare few that at 20, everything's going to be great, but there are some individuals, whether it's brain masculinization when they were younger, from DHT, from genetics, or some other mechanism, but it does happen, where 20 is actually the sweet spot. Great erections, great libido, great sensation, great climax. They feel fucking great. They feel masculine. They're DHT dominant largely, and they're totally dialed in. But for most people, what you get around 20 picograms per milliliter of estradiol is rock hard erections. I mean, your erections are going to be stellar. You're going to get nocturnals. You'll get morning erections. I mean, they will be substantially noticeable, and that will trick people into thinking you're dialed in. But in the low 20s, typically, you just have a little less support, right? You're missing a little bit of support from estradiol for the libido side of things, and you get less libido and therefore a little bit muted sensation. Is it passable? Yes. Will you be able to have penetrative sex in 20 picograms per milliliter of estradiol? Yes, usually. Will you have enough libido to get started? Yes. It depends on how high your DHT is. If the DHT is pretty high, then definitely you'll have some animal-like libido, but it might toast, meaning go south, in the middle of sex. That to me, in my experience in coaching, is like the borderline, right? There's, again, few people that can deal with that. And it's mostly people that have taken hair loss drugs, so they've been dominated by estradiol for too long and not enough DHT. So they need to be at 20 estradiol and sky-high DHT. That's not most of us. Most folks, though, rock hard erections, great nocturnals. I mean, that's the sign of just a little bit low estradiol, right? Crazy nocturnals, crazy morning erections for sex, but the libido and the sensation just not quite right. And still in that band, you can lose erections during sex because you can't quite maintain that mental side of libido. Okay, so if I haven't made it clear, you don't really want to be at 20 unless you're one of those rare few that have taken hair loss drugs, or you just sit well at 20 picograms per milliliter. All right, now let's move up. Let's move up to 35, 40 or so picograms per milliliter of estradiol. This is what you get there usually. Again, I'll always, preface it where there are a rare few that function fine at 35 to 40 picograms per milliliter of estradiol. But what typically happens is you've got great libido. Great libido. The libido is totally intact up there, right? It's not pushing the estrogen enough to start inhibiting dopamine firing from the arcuate nucleus, which is going to increase prolactin and desensitize the dopamine D2 receptors to the signal of dopamine. That's one of the reasons that extra high estrogen is not good. So the libido will be intact, but what you're going to noticeably have is less rigid erections. Less rigid erections when you get up 35, 37, 40 or so. That's when the erection quality starts to fail. The sensation will be fine. The libido will be fine. It's just the EQ that goes south when you're pushing 35, 37, 40 estradiol. That's what happens in that band commonly. All right, let's move up to 40 plus. So 40 plus, call this 40 to 45 or so picograms per milliliter of estradiol. This is a place you definitely don't want to be. Where you end up is okay libido, but sometimes you lose that libido during sex. right? So you could have enough of the oomph to get going because the libido is technically firing still at that point, although it's not optimal. It's effectively suboptimal. But then it's harder to maintain it. You ever been there? We were trying to engage and you have to focus extra to maintain, you know, the EQ and to maintain your interest in it. Like somehow it just like it starts, it's 100 miles an hour, and then it just drops to like 10 miles an hour. And you're like, what happened? You know, what happened? I'm in the middle of this. I was enjoying this. It was a great workup. And now I'm needing to focus and try hard to keep my libido going. You know, that's a prime signal that you're not in the right place with estradiol. At 40, 43 or so, EQ just gets worse and worse, right? You'll notice you might be able to get it up, but the rigidity is just not there. Yeah, usually in those cases, people are requiring 5, 7 to 10 milligrams of tadalafil on the act, in some cases even 20, to ensure the rigidity is there, right? You shouldn't have to rely on tadalafil at any dose to keep erectile rigidity. If you're dialed in, you don't need any of it, and a 2.5 to 5 milligram dose a day is a bonus. The most predominant feature of the 40-ish area is you lose the interest and you lose, therefore, the erection quality during sex in the middle of the act. So if that's happening to you, estrogen's just a little too high. All right, let's talk about 45 to 60 picograms per milliliter of estradiol. Again, I'll always preface it with a rare few will function just fine here, but we're not talking about a rare few. We're talking about what most people do well at. If you take the advice, you know, of the never manage estrogen crusaders, you're going to end up in this zone where you have mostly loss of erection quality. It'll be hard to actually get it up. You know, the libido might be there enough for you to start the act, but your EQ is just going to noticeably from the gate, be a lot less. The rigidity, gone. It is very often that like coaching clients coming to me with 45 to 60 picograms per milliliter of estradiol have full-blown erectile dysfunction. This is full-blown ED, boys, right? Where 50 to 100 milligrams sildenafil is the only thing that maybe rescues them, or 20 milligrams of tadalafil or Cialis maybe rescues them. This is full-blown erectile failure zone. Commonly, people lose erection quality during sex if they can even get it to start. Libido is so-so, right? You go past 40 or so and you into that 45, 60 range, whereas like at 40, libido was okay. At 35, you had great libido, but again, less rigid erections. You start pushing 45 to 60, 60 plus, that's when the estrogen inhibits the dopamine to the point where libido is just starting to fail. At the same time, in this higher band of estradiol, that's where sensation goes, right? Because you're dominated predominantly by estradiol, and it's blocking the sensation optimizing, the penile endothelial optimizing, the nerve ending optimizing effects of dihydro. Make no mistake, you need estrogen in the right range for sensation, but DHT is the main driver of sensation. So 45 to 60, you know, if you're listening to these guys on the web that tell you like that's fine, that, you know, your E2 is just going there proportionally based on how much test you have, and you don't even have to look at it. I mean, there's some clinics that say don't look at it, which I think is terribly irresponsible. And you're having all these problems, that's why. So all of that said, right, identifying the characteristics of each band in picograms per milliliter of estradiol, where's the best number? Well, you would think it's somewhere in between, right? It is. The single best place to be, the range for serum estradiol on TRT to have great erections and killer libido, as well as full-blown climax sensation and actual penile sensation, is 25 to 34 picograms per milliliter. That's just it. Again, you drop below 25, you're in the 20s, and the 20s is rock hard EQ, less libido. You go to 35 or above, great libido, less rigid erections. You go to 40, okay libido, lost during sex, EQ far worse, requires tadalafil, not a good place to be. You go to 45 to 60, rare function there, mostly loss of erectile quality, full-blown ED, sensation problems, climax problems, EQ during sex just fails randomly. Libido, so-so, and again, down at the 10 to 15, EQ is just going to start failing because your libido is just going to toast. You know, too low estradiol, libido's going nowhere, you get no serotonin support. You manage through the use of an aromatase inhibitor on a higher dose of testosterone, through the use of cream in a carefully crafted protocol, through the use of a cream cypionate or cream enanthate hybrid to get the estrogen between 25 and 34 picograms per milliliter, assuming DHT is 55 to 90 nanograms per deciliter. Therein is where you'll find the sex-friendly zone, often referred to as the Goldilocks zone of estradiol. I cannot tell you how many people, like, because they have enough DHT, that all we have to do is get it in that zone while being conscious of maintaining enough DHT, and the problems are resolved. Not just the sex stuff, right? The acne, the bloating, the water retention, the woman-like behavior that you start exhibiting once you're in the 45 plus picograms per milliliter of estradiol. I mean, that's why women act like they do, because they are estrogen dominant and not androgen dominant. A true stoic, DHT-driven man, assertive, dominant, gets things done, but also respectful, nice, cool, not cocky. That's a DHT-driven man with estrogen in the sweet spot. Just so happens that the sex function works perfectly there too. So boys, in your endeavor in dialing in TRT, you've got to hit those numbers, right? If you could just forget everything that you've heard on the web, all the people telling you not to manage estrogen, back and forth with different protocols and trying to dial in, and some people are on the stands for 2 years, 3 years, or more, and get the DHT between 55 and 90 and the estradiol between 25 and 34 picograms per milliliter with functional testicles, by the way. All right, you got to include that. Can't just shut down and atrophy a major system which produces its own microenvironmental hormones which influence everything, including the brain. That's the serum estradiol number to target. I'm here to break up the confusion, right? I do this for a living, and I do it for effectively a hobby, all right? Coaching people is the most fun thing for me. It's like the highlight of my day, because I get to take people with bad erections, bad libido, and get them back to youthful stages in sexual function. This is the band you want to be in. On that note, yeah, look, I mean, I'm a coach on TRT. That is all I do, is get inquiries about libido and erection, sensation, and climax issues on TRT. I've got a number of different packages, a single session call with 3 to 5 action routes for you to execute on a protocol tracker, on a document that is yours forever, tailored to your situation. You can book that in under minutes, called the Sexual Function Restoration Blueprint Consult, livecortex.com. 3 and 6 month packages. Listen, for the long-standing sexual dysfunction that has been pestering you, that hasn't really responded to a lot of things, and you're just kind of in a mess, you have the budget and you'd rather just pay an expert to do it, we'll fix the sexual function. This is all I do all day, every day. The 3 and the 6 month one-on-one coaching packages, which is full protocol engineering, I am with you every step of the way, are 30% off right now. That is a huge discount. The code for that is 30 now. Go book me in under a minute, livecortex.com. We're in the fact-finding call as soon as the next day, and we do not wait 2 weeks. We start, we hit the ground running, and brother, if you're ready, Geronimo, let's fix this thing. If you want to go at it alone, I mean, sometimes you want to experiment. Look, again, source list, anything you can think of. Test of any ester, DHT itself. Sometimes the DHT is so critically necessary to dial people in, they're just not going to dial in otherwise. Or they're on cypionate, they get the estradiol at 30 in the sweet spot, but they're not making enough DHT. A milligram on the scrotum every other day fixes the problem. You're back to youthful stages. Get that and more, sourceless, livecortex.com. It is 20% off. Code's on the screen. Look, if you're trying to dial in on cream or you want to switch to cream, I wrote the rule book. Okay, there's a lot of information out there on cream that if you listen to it, you will not be dialed in. I break all that down and give you only the surgical protocols with testosterone transcrotol cream that work, including hybrids. This course is 20% off right now, livecortex.com. All right, my brothers in test. It has been an absolute pleasure hanging out with you. Much more content coming soon. Live stream tomorrow, Saturday, so look forward to that, somewhere around 10 a.m., 11 a.m. Eastern time. I will see you then. Let's get some questions going. Like the video. Makes a huge difference to us. Tells the algorithm send our stuff out to more people. Sub to the channel. If you're new here and you're liking what you're seeing, I'm not going to BS you on this channel. I'm going to give you the straight truth, whether you want to hear it or not, on TRT sexual function being dialed in. I'd love to have you on board. Otherwise, kick ass, rock on, enjoy the rest of your day. I'll talk to you boys in the next one.